I want to still just very briefly touch on the syllabus before I leave it because I didn't finish everything I wanted to do on it in the last class, but very briefly. I know I was finishing with the schedule and with the readings, because also someone asked about the readings. The readings should be self-explanatory. If it says to read an article, you go on Canvas, and I will have uploaded. I hope. Yes, Miss. Well, it could be Ms. Lennon, Ms. Reyes, Ms. Reyes. Okay. All right, Narita. There we go. Okay. It's I should be able. I'm hoping, cross my fingers, to upload stuff to Canvas. And so you would go on Canvas and you would find the article itself or a link to a file to the article and whatever. So that should be self-explanatory. But someone asked, like, are there going to be a lot of Bible readings and stuff like that in the class? No, there aren't going to be a lot of Bible readings. Otherwise, I guess I would have assigned the Bible as a required text. But there will be some Bible readings. And just so you know, the Bible is it's a complicated book, complex book, but it's very simple to find things in it. I will give you links online to the New American Bible, which is the Catholic version of the Bible that I use. It's a good translation, so it's fine. It's put out by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, so it's legit. And it's really very simple to find. They give you a list of the books of the Bible, so you just look for the book that I ask you to read. Like if it's the Gospel of Matthew, you look for the name Matthew, you find that, and then the Bible's just set up very simply by chapter and verse. You look there each long sections of each book are organized into chapters. And within the chapters, you have little numbers in front of each sentence, or, well, maybe not each sentence, but the sentences, which are the verses. So that's how you find things. So if I say Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 through 3, you'd go online to the NAB site and you look for Matthew. You look for the number 15 for the chapter. They have it at the top of the page with the chapters. And then you just scroll down to the verses. You'll see the numbers in front of each verse. So pretty simple. Yeah, self-explanatory. Okay. I do use the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's another book that I could require, but it's not a theology course per se, so I don't require it. But and I will use it on the PowerPoints and whatnot and talk about, maybe make some quotations from it. But there is one instance where I do have you read just when I'm talking about Jesus Christ, because he is the moral norm for Catholic bioethics. And this isn't a Christology course, so I can't go over everything about Jesus Christ. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church gives a good summary in brief paragraphs, just short paragraphs. And so I give you the numbers that you are to read. Hopefully not too long. I don't think it's too long. But you have to remember that the numbers are not page numbers. They are the numbers of the paragraphs. Oh, there it is right here. So, for example, on September 28th, you should have read from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 422 to 478, okay? Not pages 422 to 478. I wouldn't want to read that much. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, fine, maybe you want to read that much. But it's the paragraphs. So you look at the numbers in front of the little paragraphs. Okay, and again, I will give you a link. It's online, so I'll give you a link to where it is online, and you just look at the page that I'll give you on the left-hand side. All the numbers are on the side, and you scroll down and you find, okay, I have to begin with 422, so you find 422, and you read only 422 to 478, 571 to 573, 595, et cetera, and so forth. You're not dealing with page numbers, okay? Just so you know that. I think that's all I wanted to say about the readings. I did not mention about my cell phone policy or my computer policy, which I used to have, but basically I don't have one. I mean, I probably should, maybe I will formally add something to the syllabus and put it into the announcements. But cell phones, just please make sure your cell phones are on vibrate. If you want to turn them off, that's fine. But I understand that people might have a need to have the cell phone present and need to use it. And if it goes off, I'm not going to go crazy. I understand that I I've certainly had those times where I've forgotten to turn my phone off and it goes off in the middle of something. So I'm not going to go nutso if it goes off. But if you do need to like take a telephone call, you have a job interview or something, or you have a family crisis or whatever, I just would ask that you take it outside of the room in the hallway and deal with it. And computers, I didn't say anything about computers. Computers are, it can go either way. Computers are one of those things where people can take notes on them, and that's great. Computers are also something where people can be playing hearts for the next hour and a half. I'm talking about, and not paying attention. But I'm not the computer police, so I'm going to assume that you're using your computers for taking notes. You're adults, so it's to your benefit to do that. But you can bring a computer if you do need it. I just should say that because sometimes people wonder. And some professors say no computers, so you don't necessarily know what my position is. So that's my position. Okay. What is bioethics? All right, let's get on to the meat of the issue, the lecture. What is bioethics? Bioethics can be called by various names, and you should take notes on what I'm saying. And try to take notes as extensively as possible. Okay, because this stuff will be fair game for the quizzes and the tests, and it might be useful for the assignments. I know people like to do bullet points, but sometimes you can't remember what I've said, so just be aware of that. Okay, but what is bioethics? It's called by various names. Bioethics is the prevalent name, but sometimes you'll come across bioethics called healthcare ethics. It's also called medical ethics. And that might be one of the reasons why a lot of you, I don't know, but I might find out, that might be a reason why a lot of you are taking the course. You might be taking it for general interest. You saw bioethics, you didn't know what it was about, you read the description, it sounded interesting, and so you decided to take it as one of your required courses in the humanities or philosophy or religion or whatever Gwynedd Mercy requires. But on the other hand, you might be in the pre-nursing program or pre-med program, pre-dentistry program, and this is something that is part of what you're required to take. Okay, so yeah, even though it's called bioethics, it does have that very strong medical bent to it, healthcare bent. But the word bioethics simply means life ethics. That's what it literally means. Healthcare ethics, medical ethics, but bios and ethos from Greek basically mean life ethics, and that's what it means if you take it literally. And philosophically, medical ethics would be seen as a subset of life ethics, of bioethics. So sometimes you will see it called biomedical ethics. So combined, we call it biomedical. To show that it's dealing not just with medicine, but also with the bios, with life issues. That usually tie into medical treatment. So bioethics is a more general category, not as specific as, say, healthcare or medical ethics. And bioethics includes additional issues that are not covered by medical ethics per se. So, for example, in bioethics, they will talk about research ethics, which is maybe something that would be covered in biomedical ethics, but maybe not. It's research is kind of its own animal. But also you have ethics related to new scientific techniques, which are not necessarily medically based or not connected to medicine, like cloning animals, cloning sheep, cloning babies, okay? Which is not so much under the umbrella of healthcare, because unless you're taking care of the baby in the neonatal unit, yeah, a person who's in a laboratory trying to splice genes or put together, splice ova, eggs, and create two babies from one egg, and they're the same baby, really, with the same genetic material, not identical twins. That's a different thing, but really clones of each other. That's something that bioethics would deal with, and that's something that's not necessarily medical ethics. Public health issues, like who gets health care, is health care a universal right? Those would be questions that are more bioethical than, say, medical. Environmental policy, okay, now we get into a very generalized notion of bios, life, including animals and even the cosmos, the environment, and how we treat the environment or don't treat it. Okay, so bioethics is a more general philosophical approach, one might say. I think I'll write the script this time. Bioethics, whoops, nice to write that. Is more general, kind of a more philosophical approach, whereas, say, medical ethics is more case oriented, more specific, more clinical, let's say, more clinical and case oriented. Bioethics might ask the question about the autonomy of the patient. Is the patient able to make decisions for himself or herself? Whereas, come in, sir. Yes, you are.
Adam.
Adam. Oh, Mr. Is it Saravo?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I said Michael Saravo. Not related to you.
Yeah.
Oh, he is? Oh, okay. In IT?
Yeah.
I saw the name on my IT ticket, and I'm like, oh, Saravo, I know that name. Okay. Good to have you, sir. Here's a copy of the syllabus that I handed out last time. You're welcome. I just started. I'm talking about what is bioethics and saying that bioethics is a more general category, and when we talk about medical ethics, it's more specific. So, bioethics might talk about the autonomy of the person, whether that they have the right to determine their own medical care. For the most part, there are limits. Whereas medical ethics might, is talking about, well, how do you treat the patient? What is the specific treatment that you're going to give the patient? Is more specific to the case of the patient. What does the patient need? Does the patient need an IV or doesn't need an IV? Does it need a certain drug or not need a certain drug? And then you're not considering the general question of autonomy, of whether you ask the patient. The doctor's considering what the patient, in his or her opinion, needs. So bioethics might say, say euthanasia. Bioethicists might talk about euthanasia and what kind of society is it that permits euthanasia? Is euthanasia a beneficial development as opposed to putting your resources into hospice care, where you're taking care of the dying in the process of dying, letting them die with dignity rather than killing them with dignity, I guess, or letting them die in another form of dignity, which may be problematic. But it's a question. So it's a question. Whereas in medical ethics, the question is, how does the doctor respond when the patient asks to end his or her life? Says, well, I don't want dialysis treatment. I've lived a long, healthy life for now, and now you're saying I need dialysis, but it's too much of an imposition, or it's too expensive, and it's not something I want to go through. I'll let myself die. I'll let my body break down and die. Okay, that's a specific case. It's more specific and not generalized. Nevertheless, generally often the terms bioethics and medical ethics are used interchangeably. So just so you know that. Okay, this could have been called an introduction to medical ethics course just as much as it could have been called a bioethics course. Okay. Did I put that on the PowerPoint? Let's see if I did. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put that on the PowerPoint. According to the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, talking about bioethics, just give this short and sweet statement, which I thought kind of gave the issue, spread the issue out there, was the branch of ethics. Bioethics is the branch of ethics that investigates problems specifically arising from medical and biological practice. So they say problems, we would say issues. Maybe you don't want to be so judgmental as saying it's a problem, but issues, okay? There are questions that come up in the treatment of people in a hospital setting. There are issues that come up in a research setting. Should I do this? What are the ethical obligations I have to the clients or the people I might be testing things on, or to the environment? Should we be genetically engineering corn? Changing the genes of corn to make it maybe more resistant to certain bugs, or to certain kind of bacteria or whatnot, that might attack it to make it stronger and more fruitful. But this is what bioethics is looking at. Okay, so they say not just medical, but also biological practices. These include, questions that these might include: the nature of treatment and the distribution of treatment, who gets treatment, what kind of treatment people receive. These are questions that you would address. And this comes in with, say, universal health care or healthcare in general. How do you treat the patients? You have issues of triage, treating the most seriously wounded before the least seriously wounded or less seriously wounded. But it also has to deal with who can pay. Just the way it is, rich people don't seem to have a problem paying for their health care. But people who are maybe middle class or poor certainly do. All right, so what do we do for those people? Well, we have safety net programs like Medicaid for the very poor. We have Medicare for those who are elderly. We don't seem to have anything in between. Well, we have the healthcare exchanges for people who, I guess that would be taking care of the middle class. But so the nature and distribution of treatment, how do we treat as many people as possible for pain and suffering, for their illnesses and sicknesses? Other questions would be the sphere of authority of the patient and the physician and others being like nurses, physical therapists, people like that, counselors, psychologists. All right. So questions about who has the authority. Does the patient have the sole authority to determine how he or she is going to be treated? Or is it the doctor? Is the physician the primary person who makes all the decisions or most of the decisions for the person under his or her care? Or is it the nurses who do most of the work? Confidentiality, okay? Privacy, the privacy of the patient. These are questions as well. The limits of acceptable intervention and experimentation. Here we get into research, which is a part of bioethics, a big part of bioethics. Are there limitations to research, or can you do just, if you can do it, it can be done? Not necessarily should it be done. That would be the question for a bioethicist. Should it be done? You have the flu virus, yes? Should you do experimentation on it to see if you can make it airborne? Or make it more airborne than in some cases it is, okay? There are scientists who do that. They take, viruses which are intrinsically harmful, and in a way see how much more harmful you can make them, just because you can. Now, there's no ethical. In some cases, they don't see any ethical issue there. It's pure science. Can you make this bacterium airborne? What will be the result of that? Okay. And the propriety of genetic research and its application. So here we get into the genes. Now that we have the human genome mapped, and not just even the human genome, you can go deal with the genes of other creatures as well. Even as I mentioned corn in my example before, you have not just the genes of animals or living creatures in that sense, but other animate beings like fruits and vegetables. You can go and you can switch genes in and out. I think it's called CRISPR. where they go in there and they switch genes in and out, and they can negate genes, they can splice in genes from other animals into stem cells into, well, that's not genes necessarily, but splice in stem cells to see what happens. Like if you, I don't know, take out a, well, doesn't matter. I think I made my point. I'll move on. Bioethics comes from two words that I've already mentioned, bios and ethos. The first word, bios, means life. But not in this. But interestingly, and maybe it's not the best choice of word in a way if you look at it, because if you look into the Greek, look into the background, it's not used in the sense. The word bios in Greek is not used in the sense of animal life or just living things. For animal life, the Greek word is zoe, zoe. So I have a picture there of animals, which you could include. Well, you would not typically include us. Um, the Greeks would include animals per se, things that we call animals, even though we are animals. I mean, obviously we're descended from animals, certain type of animal, and we have animal characteristics. Um, Bios is a way of living or a manner of living. So bioethics does not just deal with the issue of being alive, having life, zoe. And that's kind of what the Greek word means. Just being alive is zoe. All right. Bios is a broader concept, maybe a more active concept of having life. Okay. Versus not, so it's not a matter of being alive versus not being alive, which is dead. It's of having a life or a manner of living. So bios deals with general human flourishing or thriving, especially living the good life, which is what health is all about when we talk about health. It's a good, it's seen as a good or a benefit. You don't go to a hospital and say you want to be healthy, and they say, "Oh, you don't want that. Healthy? That's the last thing you want." No, it's just assumed. It's like without even it's even sub-rational. You don't even have to reason from it, or prove it. It's just assumed that health is a good. It's a benefit. That's why you're there. That's why people are there at the hospital. That's their job. Human flourishing, live the good life, the quality of life. So the human being is not just an animal, a zoe, which lives and dies. A human being has a life, quote unquote, a life, a bios. And sickness and ultimately death are impediments to a human life. So that's why sickness and death are oftentimes the things that you're going to talk about in bioethics, because they're impediments to that human flourishing. Ethos, the second part of the term, simply means custom or habit. That's all it means in Greek. No big fancy meaning. Things that people do commonly. Just basically what a habit is. And ethics itself, this is a philosophical definition of ethics. And, bioethics does fall under philosophy, really. Applied ethics, the subfield of applied ethics, is what is ethics? The rational and experiential study of human behavior in terms of what ought to be done in order to live well. Okay? So ethics doesn't necessarily, it includes questions of right and wrong, morality, and sometimes morality is used as a synonym for ethics. But there is a distinction. Okay, there is a distinction. Morality is focused very specifically on whether an action is good or evil, bad to do. Ethics is a more practical science. It's more focused on what a person does, what you should do, and what's the purpose of that? To live a good life, to live well. Now the question is, what is to live well? And well, no pun intended. um, there are different views on what living well looks like. Ethics is sometimes called Moral philosophy, you see that where morality is sometimes used as a synonym. Okay, so moral philosophy. It's also called philosophical ethics. You see where it's seen as a philosophy. I don't know if I put that down there. Well, I'll get to that in a second. If we look at the New Catholic Encyclopedia in its article on ethics, it describes ethics as the philosophical study of voluntary human action for the purposes of determining which types of activity are good, right, and to be done. Okay, an action should be good in order to be done in ethics. But again, defining what the good is another philosophical question. What is it to live well means to live good, but what is good? What is the good? What is the benefit? What is a benefit to human flourishing? Ethics is a science. It's a human science, which means it's an intellectual habit. It's an intellectual habit. And when you say intellectual habit, that's just a fancy way of saying that it's a form of knowing, of knowledge. The word science, scientia, comes from the Latin word scio, which means to know. That's all it means. And so science, all science means is knowledge. That's all it means. Yes, it has a very specific meaning today where we're thinking about the natural sciences, which you might call the hard sciences. Well, I should say hard science, but just the natural sciences like biology or chemistry or astronomy or geology. That's what people think, but really it's a more general term. And so you have, and you see this, it still kind of exists in usage in places like this, colleges and universities. You have the College of Arts and Sciences, okay? And oftentimes, separate from the College of Arts and Sciences will be the natural sciences. So, in the College of Arts and Sciences, you have things like, literature and history, philosophy. You might also have things like psychology, which and anthropology, which use scientific methods, okay, but are more really arts than sciences. Even medicine is more of an art than a science, even though it's very, very deep in the hard sciences and the natural sciences. But it's still an art. You have to know how to get the IV into the vein. You know what I'm talking about? You have to know how to deal with the patient. I mean that's a patient is not a scientific object. I mean you can study bacteria under the microscope, but you can't really do that with the patient. And how do you deal with a patient who might be difficult or is refusing treatment or is not doing the treatment and stuff like that? So there is an art form to it and to medicine, even though medicine would be categorized under the hard sciences and the natural sciences. We probably place the pre-med program out of the College of Arts and Sciences. But science, scientia, is simply knowledge, to know. And so ethics is a form of knowledge. It is scientific in that sense, scientific in the broad sense. And bioethics, as I already mentioned, is a discipline of what's called applied ethics. Okay, there are different subsets to ethics. There are a variety of types of ethics. Bioethics is one of them, and it's a subset of what's called applied ethics, which is basically what it sounds like, that the application, the practice of ethics, rather than focusing on theory per se, okay, principles per se. There are principles involved. It's not like you're going to battle with nothing. There are things that are assumed by the ethicist, but you're applying it to very specific cases. So it can also be called casuistry. And I'll talk about casuistry later, so I won't define it now. Ethics is mainly focused, or its basis is the use of human reason, something that we can all agree on. We're rational beings, and so the basis is human reason. This is a part now. when we get to Catholic principles of bioethics, the Catholic Church also uses reason as well. It's faith and reason. It's not like once you get to religion, I shouldn't say that. Some religions, the focus is primarily on, say, the sacred scripture that they have, the sacred book, or the guru, or the teacher, whatever. And human reason is maybe not so highlighted. But in the Catholic Church, human reason is just as important as the revelation that is believed to come from a God. Okay? Ethics is mainly focused on the application of human reason, but also experience. Here's where we get into case studies and stuff like that. What are the facts of the case? What is going on? What is happening? Okay, a patient comes to the hospital and has XYZ problems. One of them presents a moral dilemma. How do you deal with that within the context of these various problems, et cetera, and so forth? Okay, experience. And you're using reason to judge the experience. Trying to determine what actions will lead to the ultimate human fulfillment of your patient or of the person involved in this issue. So ethics focuses on questions of right and wrong. It does maybe not so much good, ethicists wouldn't say good or evil, but they do focus on questions of right and wrong, value and disvalue. Those are big terms for ethicists and for ethics. Value versus a disvalue. Disvalue is the opposite of a value. And the ultimate human good. What is the ultimate benefit for a person? Which may be whatever. I mean, I'll talk about, I think I talk about, maybe not here, but I think under principles of bioethics, I will talk about some different views of what the human good is. The human good could be the practice of virtue. There are various virtues like prudence and temperance and stuff like that. But for some ethicists, and this is a very influential view, the good is what is useful, what provides the most benefit to the most people. And what provides them, by benefit, that's usually defined as pleasure rather than pain. What maximizes pleasure for the most people and minimizes pain. So the good could be, a topic of controversy. Okay. For the Catholic Church, the good would be a person's relationship with God, ultimate relationship with God. Person comes from God as being created by God, but is also returning to God after death. So a lot of things have value, and not everyone can agree on what they are. I mean, friendship is a value. People see money as a value. The ultimate value is money. Whoever has the most money at the end of your life wins. Which is, if you ever seen the movie, what is it, Other People's Money, which is from, I think, the late 80s with Danny DeVito. And he's a businessman. He's in a corporation, owns a corporation. And yeah, the whole point of life, when it comes the question of the point of life and the point of the good and all that, you acquire the most stuff. Whoever is the most stuff, i.e. money, wins the game. That's the purpose of life. What is a value then? Value, to define what a value is, it is something that has worth. Something that has worth. Okay, whatever the person thinks is worthy of directing his or her life to. And on the flip side, a disvalue is something that does not have worth. Coffee has value to me. It keeps me awake, keeps me focused. Especially what's in it. Shh. No, that's okay. Don't worry. It's not hard coffee. It's soft coffee. I wouldn't want to teach you buzzed. Latin valeo. The Latin word valeo simply means to be strong, to have force. is where the word comes from. Okay, so a lot of words, when you unpack them, when you go back to their Greek or Latin or Anglo-Saxon roots, a lot of times these words we use as concepts and we philosophers talk about them and whatever, a lot of times they have very just simple, bare bones, naturalistic meanings. Okay, something that has a lot of force that affects you, okay, has value, has worth. But value can be relative. Okay, it's it can be relative to, as I said, what people think is valuable. That's the question. What is valuable? Why did I write that down? I'm just looking at my notes and I wrote something down and it doesn't come to me why I wrote it down. That'd be good to remember. Just some people. Whatever. So we talk about, say, culture, especially with cultural values and stuff like that. And if you're in the healthcare profession or you're preparing for it, you probably have to somewhere along the way take a course or a seminar or something on, cross-cultural training, because not everyone who comes into an ER is going to have the same values. And we will see this, for example, when we talk about, say, how a doctor treats a patient. In an American culture, and say an American ER, person wants to know all the time what's going on. Where are the nurses? Where are the docs? Tell me what's going on. Keep me informed all the time. Be very clear. But in some cultures, and this is not generally true, and this is just what I've heard, so if I'm wrong, please, I apologize. But in some cultures, such as South American cultures, there might be a deference to the physician where the physician is the one who takes over control and is the one who makes the decisions. And those decisions be might be decided as to what you don't tell the patient about his or her condition. So the patient might not have to know everything in the case of a certain cultural value. All right. So values can be culturally defined, and you have to be sensitive to those. We should be sensitive to those, I should say. But values can also, they are relative. They do have a relativity, but they can also have an ultimacy. They can be ultimate, meaning that they can be meaningful and fulfilling always, everywhere, and for everybody. And that's where ethicists get into and philosophers arguing over what are values and disvalues. Some philosopher might argue that human friendship or community is a value that is valuable cross culture. Okay, you find it in primitive cultures, but you find it in more civilized cultures. And by saying civilized, I don't want to say that primitive cultures don't necessarily have civilization or that they're not complex. They are. Um, it's just anthropological terminology. Um, Cultures that are primitive don't have cities, whereas civilized cultures usually have cities. These are things that help anthropologists determine how to use the terms. Anyways, but someone might argue that health is another value that is a value whether someone is a tribesman in Papua New Guinea or a socialite in New York City. Both should get vaccines against, various diseases and illnesses. Why? You might say, well, because the value is universal. It doesn't matter whether you in a very, I don't want to say civilized, I want to say more, say modern type Western culture or culture that is still very much not far removed from the Stone Age, which Papua New Guinea is. I mean, they only had Stone Age technology until the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, when Australians started showing up looking for gold. And they didn't know what iron was. They didn't know what bronze was because it had never developed. It had just never gotten there yet until Westerners showed up. And yet, someone might not, I don't know if anyone would argue that, well, the Papua New Guineans don't need vaccines because they're of a more primitive culture. They're not of a Western culture. They don't have modern science. They never did. And so this would be, say, an imposition into their culture. This would be some, you give their kids their vaccine against mumps or against polio. Why would you do that? But this would be, you wouldn't even think twice about it in the Western world because we think, well, we're advanced. We're advanced culture. We have advanced science and advanced technology. Of course, we should have the best. This is a value. We should have it. But if it's a universal value, if it has universal value, then everyone should get it. No matter what culture the person comes from or what stage of development that culture might be at. What distinguishes ethics generally is the ethicist's interest in what constitutes good human life rather than just what makes the person successful. Okay? Which is not always true. Some ethicists, I think, might focus on what will bring success, what will get you to where you want to go. But I think a lot of ethicists are focused on what constitutes a good, truly human life. And when ethicists talk about what is the good, they are focusing on what ultimate value means. What is the ultimate value? The good. And there's the definition, the name for that which ultimately benefits the human person. It is the ultimate value. Comes from German, or say Proto-Germanic. Proto, those of you who are in the health sciences, I like to do a lot of etymologies because I find them interesting and they usually help my mind wrap itself around words and remember them. But also, I do them because if you are in the health sciences, and I believe a lot of you for the class are, or might be tending in that way, you got to know Greek and Latin roots. You just got to know them because they're all over the place in medicine and healthcare. And, and so at least basic roots, because they will help you remember words and terminology, and they'll also help you kind of break apart words and terminology to understand what the word means, maybe before you even know what it is. So proto is the Greek word protos for first. So Proto-Germanic means first German. So when we get into like this is stuff for linguists, and this isn't a linguistics class, so I'm not, but just to show you where the word comes from. When you get to the underlying basis for the Germanic languages, of which English is a Germanic language, you have the word Goda, and they put an asterisk in front of it. Whoops. I knew it was there, I still did. Just so you know, in case you're wondering, that's not a typo. The asterisk means that this is a theoretical version of what they think the word, how it was pronounced by the ancient Germans, Goda. Something that is, and what it meant, something that is fitting, something that is suitable. You might even say valuable. That's where the word good comes from. It's good because it has value. It has a benefit. Ethical systems relate human activity to some overall transcendental goal of living. And that's what transcendental means. It's just a fancy word for overall. I'll write it over here. What a beautiful day. A nice day. And a beautiful breeze. I don't know, I guess there's a hurricane out in the Atlantic or something, so maybe that's what the transcendental, overall, I mean, that's basically what transcend means, to be over something. So human activity has some overall goal for living, which gives ultimate fulfillment to whatever the human person is aspiring to be. Okay, so for example, it answers the question, what makes a person fully human? In the case of biomedical ethics, health. Health. People are coming to, think about this. People are coming to hospitals to be fully human. You ever think about it that way? I think oftentimes we think about it more in the sense of the nuts and bolts of what's going on, what pills the people need or what surgery the person needs, what fixing they need, cut them open and fix this and cut that and tie this back together and whatever. Get so focused on the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the hospital, you forget the overall philosophical, ethical picture, which is people are coming there to be fully human, healthy. It's makes for what is a good human life. In this case, and for the purposes of this course of bioethics, ethics is focused on the flourishing of human life within the context of suffering, sickness or illness, and death, and their treatment or amelioration by professionals of healing. Amelioration simply means to make better. It's a fancy word for making better. Melior in Latin means better. So to make better. Okay? And that's what you're trying to do in a healthcare setting, no matter what it is. Could be a psychologist with a client. You want to make the person better. All right? Not just a physician in his office or her office. You still want to make the person. That's what you're there for. But you're doing it within the context of what is the immediate context of suffering, which includes these twin issues of the person is sick, usually sick in some way, is ill in some way, or the person is dealing with a death, maybe a death situation. They're in the process of dying. So bioethics, well, I'm talking about bioethics. I guess I'm kind of segueing into something else here. Okay. So that's what ethics is kind of focusing on in this course. Even though if you took a course, say with Dr. Messina or Dr. Cluis, who are the two philosophers here on campus, you took an ethics course with them, the focus is going to be different. This is a specific course, bioethics, and in bioethics, it's a particular way of ethical reasoning that substantially depends on the findings of the life sciences. This is taken from the Internet Encyclopedia. I got this from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, an article by John Stewart Gordon. I don't know if I put it on the PowerPoint or not. Yeah, I did. Okay, good. I put the information there. So if you're curious, you want to go see the article on bioethics, you can. All right. So that's how bioethics is different from a general ethics, that the life sciences are what it's rooted in. And that's what this course is going to be focusing on, if you haven't figured that out already. All right. So I'm not setting generalized ethics aside, but it is a subset of ethics that I'm dealing with. So again, for the purposes of this course, the focus is primarily on the healthcare aspect of bioethics. That is the medical ethics aspect. So I'm kind of reaching back to the beginning of what I was talking about when I talked about you can also call this medical ethics and healthcare ethics. Yeah, you could also call this a healthcare ethics class or a medical ethics class or a biomedical ethics class, because that's going to be the main focus of bios. What is the human living that we're looking at? And it makes sense because, as I've also mentioned several times, that's probably why a lot of you are taking the course. It's certainly required of people who are in like the nursing program and the healthcare programs here. What are some basic concepts for talking about bioethics, just some terminology that is going to be used and needs to be unpacked, and so you know what I mean and we mean in general, because we use these words and we might not understand them, or we might understand them, but we haven't really thought deeply about them, and that's something that perhaps we should do. If you're going to go into health care, you might want to ask yourself, well, what is health? Or even first, ask yourself, what is health care? That's okay. I knew it was there. Ah, yes. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. What is healthcare? The complex, which is a group, just a fancy word for a group of things. Okay. Healthcare is a complex of people and systems involved in the promotion, study, and treatment of human health. Okay. So we're dealing here with people essentially in healthcare, but also systems, groups of people, excuse me, and they want to make people healthy, but they also study health or health related issues, like what causes illnesses or how to treat them, do research on that. If you want to look at the progression of a disease or whatnot, you might do so in a laboratory. Describe the symptoms and how to treat it. Creation of drugs. You know, how do you create drugs that will treat certain illnesses and sicknesses? And treatment. I already mentioned treatment. So healthcare includes, even mostly includes, the diagnosis and treatment of human illness. That's basically what's, for the most part, going on in human healthcare, including death. Death would be included under, hospice would be included under an illness, but not completely. Not completely, because there are also healthcare professionals that are not necessarily treating illnesses or diagnosing illnesses, but they do have a connection to the human body and to human flourishing, the flourishing of the human person. So, for example, a lot of hospitals now have nutritionists, okay, who are not physicians or nurses. They're not qualified in that way. They can't diagnose an illness, okay, but they do know how you should be eating and what kind of nutrition you should be giving your body for the optimal performance or optimal health, okay? Physical therapists might be another group that don't necessarily diagnose illness, but you're sent to them usually after something, like you've had knee surgery or you've replaced a hip and you might have to relearn how to walk, or you have to learn how to walk in order to strengthen the muscles. Or say you have like sciatica or something, which is I think a nerve issue, and you might be sent to a physical therapist for various stretching exercises. A lot of stretching in physical therapy, and stuff like that. Well, that's not really the same thing as a surgeon who's cutting someone open on the operating table and taking out their heart and hooking them up to a heart-lung machine. And not the same thing, okay? Or a doctor who's prescribing drugs, or a nurse who's running an IV or administering drugs to a patient. It's not the same kind of health care, but does come under health care, this complex. They're not diagnosing or treating illness, but a nutritionist is promoting healthy eating habits, and the same kind of thing is going on with, say, a physical therapist. They're promoting the health of the human body. So basically, so you're not in pain, I think, is more with physical therapy, treating pain. A hospital is not a place of sickness or illness per se. See, we see it that way, but it's not really a place of sickness per se. It should be seen as a place where people go to get better. That's why people are coming to the hospital or going to see their doctor. Yes, because we see the illness, Yes, because they're not feeling well. But the reason is they want to get better. That's the focus. That's really what a hospital is all about. It's a place for people to get better, to get healthy. Healthy, which is the condition of being sound or whole in your body, mind, or spirit. And in fact, the word comes from Old English, health, health, which comes from the Old English word hal, which is where we get our word whole. To be whole is saying the same thing as to be healthy. And notice I add spirit to the definition. If you go on like Merriam-Webster online or the Oxford Dictionary of the English language, they'll probably just stop at body and mind. Okay, the body and the brain, basically. And to be whole in those things, I add the spirit. Not just because this is, a course at a Catholic university and there's some kind of, and it's, even the description of the course in the course catalog talks about the sanctity of human life and Judeo-Christianity and all this religious stuff. But, most hospitals, even if they're secular hospitals, they're non-religious hospitals, they're going to have a chaplaincy. They're going to have some reverend, some imam, some rabbi there or on call, just like the doctors and the nurses and other professionals. Why? Not to treat the body. They're not qualified. Not even to treat the mind, because they're not qualified. For that, you send them to the shrink, the psychiatrist or the psychologist, send them to mental health. So what are they there for? If they're not qualified to treat your body and they're not qualified to treat your mind, something else is afoot. So not even in non-religious institutions, you're going to treat the spirit. There's something more to our humanity than just sickness of the body and sickness of the mind. There is sickness of the spirit as well. Call it the soul, if you will. How do you, and this might come up with a patient, for example, where the patient does have an illness, say a physical illness that is being treated, okay, or a mental illness that is being treated. But when you talk to the patient, the person says, yeah, but you know what, doc, I feel hopeless. Hopelessness, lack of purpose. That doesn't seem to fall under the body-mind paradigm. We seem to be venturing into something else. Well, what gives you hope? Well, maybe my family or having a job to do or something like that. Well, those are not necessarily things that a physician is there to do for you. Maybe a social worker, again, and social workers have some psychological and counseling training as well. But even a social worker might not be able to help you. They can give you a job. They can, okay, fine, we'll find a job for you. We'll send you to some kind of service that helps cook people up with jobs, goes over your resume, but still don't want to get out of bed. Well, are you depressed? Yeah, I'm depressed, but I'm hopeless. And the drugs don't work. I still feel hopeless. Spirit. So I would add spirit to that. I would call it the soul, but you don't have to call it that. Health. Health is understood, especially in a healthcare setting, and I get this. This is mainly the focus of healthcare. Is to be focused on freedom from physical disease or pain. Okay, physical disease or pain. That's the main focus of health, of wholeness. And by wholeness, we means this, just to kind of go deeper into the word. If the basic root meaning of the word health is wholeness, what does it mean to be whole? It means to be really free from, and you can see again the physicalistic understanding of it, the naturalistic understanding. Whole essentially means to be hal in Anglo-Saxon, to be free of an injury. Okay, you're not wounded. And we talk that, and we still talk that way. We might not speak Anglo-Saxon anymore, which is Old English. We speak modern English, but we still have the concepts in our mind. They're still kind of there. We still understand it that way. We talk about people being whole, making them physically whole, mentally whole, psychologically whole. And what do we mean by that? That they're not injured in their mind, in their body, or in their spirit. You can injure a person in spirit. So physically, mentally, emotionally sound and healthy, but also to be free of disease or deformity. To be whole means that you have all your proper parts and components. So to have all your limbs. A person who has his or her legs amputated is still a human person, obviously, has still his full human dignity, but they're not whole. That wholeness has been violated in a way for whatever reason, maybe a disease, maybe an accident. And it's weird that in some ways our body and our minds, our brains, well, it could be our brains, but it's weird. It's hard to locate. Kind of know this because sometimes you'll hear amputees talk about their missing limbs as if they're still there, like you can still feel them there. Now, I'm not an amputee, obviously, so I can only go on what I've heard from people who are. So I don't know what that feels like. But it's some mental condition where you still kind of feel like, yeah, the arm is still there and I can move it, even though it's not there and there's nothing to move because it's not there. Your body still wants to be whole. It wants to be free from injury, even when physically it can't be whole. If the arm is gone, it's gone. If the bodily organ is gone, if they took out a kidney for an organ transplant, it's gone. It's not growing back. Liver might grow back, but the kidney apparently does not. So the professional's role, bioethically, the role in illness, is to assist in providing or restoring wholeness to the human person. That's the job of the healthcare professional. Or we could say, and maybe it's a better term, I think, maybe a better phrase, the professional of healing, the healing professional, to kind of bring back that sense of you're a healer. You're not a healthcare provider. The healthcare provider is insurance terminology. It's economics. It's like, the person comes in for a service and you provide it and then you pay. No, you're a healer, first of all. You're trying to restore wholeness, health to a person. And that's why healthcare is said to be or should be holistic. The word holistic, which also comes from the word whole. Well, they don't spell it with W. I don't know why. Well, I know why, because it comes from holos from Greek, but which means whole. And so you'll hear a lot of talk, not just nowadays, but for a long time this has been going on, about the holistic care of the patient. You don't just look at the symptoms anymore, like maybe you did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. You don't even see the person. And maybe 100 years ago, you didn't even see the person who was in front of you. All you saw were, well, the person presents with this and that and the other. And the doctors all stand around and they still do that in, in medical schools. I don't know how it makes the patient feel, but I guess it's just the nature of the beast at a teaching hospital where they all show up for rounds and there you are in the bed, one naked under this cloth and they're just going to stand there and talk about your condition. So, what's the person present with? Well, you have a cough and you have some fluid in your lungs. What are the possible etiologies and stuff? It's like, I'm here. Hello. But it's just the nature of the beast. People have to learn, and you have to learn on people. And that's just the way it is. So healthcare should be holistic, treating the whole person. So you're treating the physical body. The physical body. You're treating, and I don't know if I put that on the PowerPoint. Yeah, I did. Okay, the physical body, which is mainly the focus. I mean, granted, that's still the main focus of healthcare. This is often the primary focus, the physical body, because usually the physical body is what is the problem. A lot of times, it's maybe not so much psychology or mental stuff, and oftentimes the body screams for treatment. I mean, a person comes in with a heart attack, you got to be immediately on top of it. You can't wait. That's oftentimes the case with serious illnesses. You cannot wait. So obviously it's the primary focus. Your first focus is not going to be the spiritual. All right, your primary focus is going to be the physical, but you also have the mental state. A person comes in who's suicidal or something like that and says, "I have a plan to kill myself." You have the mental state. You want to look at that, and you have the spiritual aspect. And a person may have all three. That's where we're looking at holistic, because a person comes in with a gunshot wound. Obviously, that's a physical ailment. You need to treat that immediately. But you might also find that the person with the gunshot wound is, in the process of treating them, is schizophrenic, is just not as out of his mind, is saying things that have loose associations, don't make any sense. Um, you know, doesn't even think he's in a hospital. He thinks he's at Disney World. So you realize that you now have a medical consult. But then in talking to the person, you find out that the person also has feelings of hopelessness, as I mentioned before. You just use a hopeless example as well. And lack of purpose in life, doesn't know what life is all about, what's the meaning of life. And these also might be symptoms of the schizophrenia. The person's just saying anything that's coming out, but also it might be something for the chaplain to then later on, when the person is calmed down, you have them on some meds which can help, and you've operated and taken the bullet out. You can then sit down and talk with them. So what did you say about that? Was that something, it's about being hopeless and what's the meaning of life, and there's no meaning, and maybe that's how you got into the situation you got into. Let's talk about that, and maybe send the chaplain for that. Obviously, the physical is going to, if a person comes in from a horrific car crash with broken bones and lacerations, the physical wholeness is going to be the priority, or in the case of that gunshot wound. So what is healing? Health, then it stands to reason that healing is bringing about that wholeness. If health means wholeness to the body, to the spirit, and the mind, then healing is the act of bringing that wholeness to the human person. But what are you bringing wholeness from? Well, sickness. You could also say illness. I'll get to ill in a moment. Or maybe I won't. I might end with sickness. What is sickness? It's the condition of being disordered, weakened, or unsound in body, mind, or spirit, which comes from the Old English word seok, which means to be ill, unwell, diseased, weak. To be weak, again, you see that naturalistic explanation that, when you're sick, you feel weak a lot of times. You don't want to move around. You don't want to get out of bed, or you don't want to get up when you're sitting down because you're weak. But it also has the meaning of being corrupt or sad or troubled about something. So there's a mental component as well. So sickness is a disorder in the wholeness that's expected. You expect that you're going to be whole, or that you should be whole. And again, this is something that's almost unprovable. You could call it a transcendental idea. It's an overall principle of human life, a benefit, a good of human life. Health is a good, a benefit that's almost unprovable. You don't really think about it. You just know that when you're sick, that's not a good thing. That's something that needs to be treated. you don't have places that you go when you're healthy. There's no. I mean, what's the opposite of a hospital? If a hospital is where people go who are sick, who want to get better, to get healthy, to restore health, where's the place you go when you're healthy? Nowhere. You don't go anywhere. Well, I shouldn't say nowhere. You go everywhere. You're at home. You're at school. You're out walking on campus. You're going to the store. If you're healthy, if you're sick, you're not. You're probably just going to the hospital and doctor's offices, places to make you healthy. Okay. So you see that the difference, that sickness is a disorder to health. Okay. Well, anyways. All right, so I'm going to end here with that, and I'll talk about illness when we come back on Tuesday. Very good to see you all. Have a good week.
Really? Yeah, you know there's something. 6'4" kid. 6'4" kid. Her kid is like 6'2".
Okay.
120.
I'll turn you off, my friend.